You're standing in line. Your phone is at 1%. There is nothing to look at, nothing to scroll, nothing to do. Within seconds, something in your chest tightens. You feel restless. You feel almost panicked. That feeling has a name, and you've been taught to hate it. It's boredom. But the real answer is far stranger than you think. You've been told boredom is empty, a void, a problem to be solved with a screen. But your brain didn't evolve to fill empty time. It evolved to use it. Think about that for a second. What is boredom actually for? 200,000 years ago, your ancestors didn't have notifications. They didn't have music or books or anything to consume on demand. They had long stretches of nothing, walking for hours toward water, waiting beside a fire for the meat to cook, watching the horizon for danger that might never come. And in that nothing, something important was happening inside their skulls. Something you still carry today, buried under a few hundred apps. Neuroscientist Mary Helen Immordino-Yang studies what the brain does when it isn't focused on a task. She found something surprising. When you stop concentrating, your brain doesn't switch off. It switches networks. A system called the default mode network turns on. This is the part of your brain responsible for daydreaming, for imagining the future, for replaying memories, for figuring out who you are. Boredom isn't your brain doing nothing. It's your brain doing something it can only do when you stop doing everything else. Here's the part that should unsettle you. For your ancestors, boredom wasn't a glitch in the system. It was a trigger built into the system on purpose. It pushed them to explore, to wander past the next ridge just to see what was there, to try a new route to water instead of the familiar one, to pick up a stick and experiment with it, not because they needed to, but because doing nothing had become unbearable. Boredom was the itch that built curiosity. Without it, there's a real chance your ancestors never would have left the valley they were born in. They would have stayed exactly where it was safe, exactly where it was known, forever. You inherited that same itch, but you don't live in that world anymore. Psychologist Sandy Mann ran a series of experiments at the University of Central Lancashire that changed how researchers think about this feeling. She had participants do an incredibly boring task first, like copying numbers out of a phone book for several minutes straight. Mind-numbing, repetitive, the kind of task you'd pay good money to avoid. Then she asked them to come up with creative uses for an everyday object, like a polystyrene cup. The bored group didn't just perform fine, they outperformed the group that skipped the boring task entirely. Their ideas were more original. Their thinking was looser, less obvious, less tied to the first answer that came to mind. Boredom hadn't slowed their minds down. It had loosened something free. Why would that be true? Because boredom forces your brain to look inward for stimulation instead of outward. And looking inward is where new connections get made. Ideas you didn't know you had start bumping into each other in the dark. This is why your best ideas hit you in the shower, on a walk, in the gap right before sleep when your thoughts start to drift and blur. Those are some of the only moments left in modern life where your brain is still allowed to be bored on purpose, even if you didn't plan it that way. And that's the problem. You've engineered boredom out of your life almost completely, without ever deciding to. Every idle second now has a competitor. A red notification dot waiting in your pocket. An autoplay countdown ticking down before you've even decided you want more. A feed that refreshes itself the instant you open it, offering an infinite, bottomless supply of almost interesting things. The moment your brain starts to drift toward that itchy, restless feeling, you reach for your phone before you even register what you're doing. Your thumb moves before your mind catches up. You're not curing boredom when you do this. You're interrupting it before it can finish its job. Researcher Manoush Zomorodi spent a year studying what happens when people deliberately put their phones down during boring moments. Walking to work, standing in line at the pharmacy, waiting for a kettle to boil instead of filling those 90 seconds with a screen. The pattern was consistent across nearly everyone she studied. People who let themselves stay bored, even for a few uncomfortable minutes, reported more creative breakthroughs at work, clearer thinking about personal problems, and a stronger sense of what they actually wanted out of their own lives. The boredom wasn't punishing them the way they expected. It was working quietly underneath the discomfort. Think about how strange that is when you slow down and actually picture it. A small band of early hum,